attended meetings, and crowd here shows that's still true. I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank California Highway Patrol for being our sponsor. Our commercial sponsor is Tektronix. They will be giving us an overview of their products here in a little bit. And we'll start off with self-introductions. I'm John Lemon, your current president, for another 2 hours. We'll start here.
Russ Nichols with Port Stockton Telecom Manager. Rick Salcedo, Port Stockton Ship Department.
Ricardo Navarro, Port of Stockton.
Megan Suarez, Alameda County Fire Department.
Morning, Dan Kelleher with Harris Corporation.
Steve Gordon, Sacramento Fire.
Mike Kinsey, Alabama Fire. Oh, sorry. I jumped in front of you. Sorry about that.
Ron Lyons with Frazier.
Frazier Mobile, we're doing commercials too.
Yeah, okay.
Ron Lyons with Radio Mobile. We're not going to jump in this schedule agenda. Radio Mobile is a solution provider for mobile data systems. Recently, last month or so, we had a tremendous amount of activity with our systems with Cal Fire. Not only with Camp Fire, but also down south in Woolsey's Fire with Kelly County and the city fire departments. Cal Fire was heavily using our products as well. One of the key issues, or one of the key products that we have is a very simple box that allows switching between multiple wireless networks. Very important, especially when you're in the middle of the forest. There's local LMR coverage. There's no carrier coverage from either carrier or any of the carriers. This will give you at least last ditch effort up through satellite for location information. It's very important. If I can give any assistance to explaining situation awareness, personal safety, efficiency in operations, lowering costs, let me know.
Jackie Case, your president-elect and Emergency City.
Good morning, Brenda Bruner, Alameda County Sheriff's Office, your immediate past president.
Ethan Wiggins, Alameda County Sheriff, your current vice president.
John Lepore, Sacramento Sheriff. Mario Reese, Sac Sheriff. Derek Sullivan, Sullivan County.
Cam Sostina, San Joaquin County.
Mike Butler, Riga Corporation. We are radio controls and power system design engineers.
Ron Allen, Sacramento County, retired.
Kevin Eldridge, County Supplemental Center. George Lowry, Cal OES, the Communications Coordinator in Mutual Aid Region 4.
Lance Reddick, Golden Gate Bridge.
Chuck Burdance, Mocator Consulting.
Angela Azevedo, retired City, California.
Nathan Hinkle, Sacramento County.
Chuck Bozak, Sacramento County. Paul Wilcox, Sacramento County.
Paul Mills, the sales group manufacturers rep.
Eric Stenning, Winkle Consulting. Brent Kunstler, Stockton Fire Department.
Coach Kerwin, Contractor Doctor. Chris Sales, Infinity Wireless, with sales service and support, microwave radio. Sorry.
Good morning, Don Jones, Sonoma County Sheriff's Office.
Susie Rivera, Folsom Police.
Hi, I'm Bill Schmay. Work for Tally Communications. We're a privately held distributor of wireless infrastructure and mobile products. Cover the West for Tally, the Western 5 states. We distribute everything from mobile antennas to cable kits to towers, everything from low capacity SCADA radios by manufacturers such as Freewave to public safety grade large pipe microwave from Ceragon Networks. So if I can be of any assistance to anybody that has inquiries into infrastructure related products, please reach out. Thank you.
Jeff Johnson, Epic Marketing. I'm the local rep for Kenwood and Pyramid. And if anybody wants to see the new Kenwood BTT FirstNet device, I've got it here. Take a look at it. Great. Thanks.
Dave Jones, Celtic Communications, Communications Specialist.
Pam Jones, Civil Communications Secretary.
Albert Shilton, Bob.
John Marion, Union County, San Francisco Radio Shop.
Good morning, Gordon Poole with Motorola Solutions.
Ernest Gallo, City of Torrance, and the CCRA Executive
Hi, Doug Roberts, County of San Bernardino, and President of CPRA.
Good morning, Mike Sicani with GMB. We're a battery manufacturer.
Carl Grover, City of Roseville, and one of your directors.
Bill Blahandrius, Senior Account Manager with Motorola Solutions.
Michael DePrado, Sonoma County Sheriff.
Markey with Mobile Solutions, and state aid.
Good morning, I'm John Cofield, Telecom Manager at APCO.
Randy Murphy, Crawford County.
Good morning, Bill Blue with Epic Marketing, representative also for Kenwood, P.F. Johnson, and Curtis.
Jim Joseph, Sac County, and William Rock.
Steve Vega, Calaveras, Public Safety Unit.
Diane Garcia, State Health Unit. Patty Wilson, Kenneth Story.
John Thompson, Calvary Professional. And then we have one.
Mike Stevenson from Tektronix, we're a manufacturer of our testing equipment, and we'll be making presentations.
Heidi.
George Ziegler, Test Force USA, prime distributor for our test equipment. I used to work with Aeroflex, Cabo, Miyabi, IFR, a lot of names that I know, but I joined Test Force so we provide other equipment solutions as well. And I introduced Tektronix, which I'm going to talk to you about. Thank you.
And I'm Mark Eagle, I'm representing, I don't know anything about in a minute, about experience something in geolocation. So I'm with Tektronix and I'm a technical manager on the RF side.
Thank you, and thank you to our distinguished guests from CPRA. Excuse me. Oh,
Good morning, last but not least. Iggy Brigada with JPS Interoperability Solutions. And incidentally, at 1 o'clock, I'm going to hold a very condensed boot camp after the frequency coordination at 1 o'clock in room 3. It's ACU specific, very technical. We're going to talk about digital signal processors and how to align the ACU digital signal processors with respect to different types of radio systems, single sideband, HF, conventional, digital radio systems. So it's going to be in rooms 3 within this building, and it's anybody's invited, but it's technical and specific to our radio interfaces. Thank you.
Manny Vieira, the sales group, representing JPS and Times Microwave. I'm also your commercial chair.
Scott Andrews, AT&T FirstNet. I'm your FirstNet rep to answer all questions regarding to FirstNet, working for AT&T. I'm also the vice CCAM, working with Manny, serving the board.
And I am Jackie Andrews. Operation Kid Safety First is a nonprofit for public safety education in schools, and I am your chapter treasurer-tary.
PIO.
I think we caught it. Housekeeping, restrooms are out into the main hallway to the left, and to the left down the hallway again. This is a secured facility. If you go outside this building, you cannot get back in unless somebody lets you back in. And the doors immediately behind me are marked in emergency exit only signs, but they're kind of hard to see. If you go out them, the alarm will go off. We've had a couple of instances of that in previous meetings. So we are also, as we've been doing the last several meetings, we are live streaming. So if you're not wanting to be seen live streaming, kind of avoid this. The first order of business, unfortunately, is some sad news. Recently was made aware that Randy Hagar passed away last week. He was our CPRA, our NAPCO chapter president back in 2013. He was 700 and 800 megahertz RPC chair for a number of years. He was on the board for a number of years. Anyway, he passed away last week. It kind of shocked everybody. There is a GoFundMe set up for his daughter. If anybody is interested in the information, I have it. But in his honor, I think we should take a moment of silence. Okay. So thank you. And with that, start into our committee reports. We'll start off with the treasurer.
So really just reporting our account balance. So we have a Wells Fargo checking account and it currently has $98,580.16.
Okay, it's going to be fairly brief. There wasn't a whole lot of updates. Membership, we are currently at 574 members. Since the November meeting, we've added 17 new members. We've got Ruth Angel from Shasta Area Communications, Lori Anderson, San Mateo County Public Safety Communications, Kyla Bacon, doesn't indicate their affiliation, Jody Bowles, Santa Cruz Regional 911, Marshall Briggs, County of Marin Department of Public Works, Amber Butlermore, Kern County Fire, Gladys Contreras, CSU East Bay, Michael Doherty, Palo Alto Police Department, Kirsten Earhart, San Jose Fire Department, Patricia Hubbard, Stockton Fire Department, Sal Yeager, Mountain View Police Department, Anna Joseph, Stockton Fire Department, Don Lockhart, and Famchoy Seichow, both from Berkeley Police and Fire, Ethan Simpson, County of Marin Department of Public Works, Lori Smith, and Sheila Wall, both the Stockton Fire Department. Are any of them here today? I don't believe so. Okay. The next order of business is elections. This being the December meeting, we do have elections. We have one candidate for vice president. It's Carl Grover. There he is. And then we've got three candidates for board of directors. We've got Brenda Bruner, Brent Finster, and Diana Garcia, ways back. We have two open positions, so vote for two. We have ballots. If you are a non-commercial full member of APCO, please raise your hand and we'll make sure you get a ballot. If you would mark the ballot and give it back to Jackie at the check-in table no later than the end of the break between commercial and the keynote. And we'll go ahead and we'll count ballots and make the announcement just before lunch. I don't know, Jim Coates has anything for emerging technology, but I do have something that I was made aware of just yesterday for those of you who are to add interference to our environment. Apparently, large industrial fans that are used in warehouses have controllers that are sources of RFI, just like LED light bulbs. And if luck would have it, the new CHP dispatch in Fresno is right across the street from a large warehouse that has these devices keeping the warehouse cool. And they just happen to also generate broadband interference from about 37 megs to about 45 megs. We're right smack dab across the CHP's frequency range. So, low band still, right? If you're getting interference, you might want to consider that as a possible source. These are huge, huge fans. And with that, I think that was pretty quick. Huh? Oh, Manny. Yes.
Hi, I'm Manny. I'm the commercial chair. I just want to recap one more time about our tabletop vendor showcase that we had in September. The outcome was tremendous. The vendors loved it, and from the attendance, it seemed that everybody seemed to like the location. If any vendor would like to talk to me about anything they'd like to see, changed at it, please contact me. We'd appreciate it. Second part of my conversation is we are now doing Facebook Live. We started 6 months ago doing this. We haven't told many people. It's kind of like a secret. At our award banquet in September, we had 70 plus at the meeting, because we had a meeting in the morning and then the banquet for lunch. We had 70 people. We had 420 Facebook Live hits that day for the meeting and 520 for the banquet. So that's in addition to the 70 people there. So I would think that we are doing a very good job, and starting next month, we will actually tell everybody that we're doing this. It'll be on the website. Across the country, there's 3 or 4 chapters that are doing it and been very successful. Our numbers seem to be fantastic. It's a way for a vendor that sponsors us to maybe be online with 200 more people. Maybe we can charge them more money. No. So I think it's been really good. I would like to talk to the commercial side about next year's vendor showcase, if they would like to do the same spot. I'm also starting next week, I'll be sending out to the commercial vendors a listing of all our meetings for next year. So for those that always are first to get back to me, they will get the first slot. Other than that, that's all I have.
Okay, thank you. So we'll take a quick break and let Tektronix get set up. Let's everybody try to be back in their seats by about 10, 20, about 12 minutes. Again, be aware of the alarm doors going outside immediately behind you. Thank you.
Where the ballots go? Good, how are you? Where do the ballots go?
Oh, and one other thing, just make sure you don't open the door directly behind me on the other side of the lobby, as you will be arrested.
Okay, that's how you do it.
We're fortunate. We're in the finance, that area of so we have a little bit of brush here, but not really. Always fine, so we're all living. If we're burning up houses, it's straight line, houses on either side of the house.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because it's not a very long state. So I heard that that's Thank you.
It works. Big thing, state science. Big thing, fire service is looking at radio science. Really clearing out. You're not getting what you need, I know.
I don't want to select just my
Hey, how are you? Merry Christmas. By March, Scott, we gotta have all this stuff resolved. We're gonna probably plus the dates.
Did we have everybody? Go ahead and take your seats. We'll get started. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and get started. Again, a reminder, and one thing I forgot to mention is not only don't go up outside because you can't get back in, but because of security reasons, don't go outside. Actually, you can go outside, but if you do, you need to be escorted by a CHP employee. So find a CHP employee. I don't know where John went. There's several of them here in the room, but yeah, don't even go outside because you'll get questioned. So we'll go ahead and get started again. Our commercial sponsor this month is Tektronix, and I'll turn it over to Mark. Thank you.
So, welcome everybody. I'm from Tektronix, and I'm actually local, so I live in San Francisco, but I'm the technical manager for our radio products. Tektronix is based in Beaverton, up outside Portland, in Oregon, and it's been in business since about 1946. So it's a pretty learned company when it comes to making measurements. We're famous for oscilloscopes. We invented the triggered oscilloscope back in 1946, and that's how we started the business. And over the years, we've done more and more. And eventually, we've put radio receivers on the front of our oscilloscopes. So it allows us to acquire a lot wider bandwidth and do a lot more processing and trigger on all sorts of different signals, because triggering is one of our core things. So I'm going to talk about products a little bit because we are responsive. But I'm going to try to keep it technical as well, and hopefully you can walk away with this with some extra knowledge of how to do coverage mapping and interference hunting. And you know, a couple of days ago, I was thinking, oh, what shall I do that presentation on? Oh, maybe I'll do B25. And I thought, oh, no, I really don't know about B25. And I thought, how about coverage? I thought, yeah, coverage is good because you need to know where all the radios work. I thought, well, maybe I'll add interference hunting in as well, because, you know, those are probably the two biggest issues that we run into when maintaining a radio network. So, hence, I created this presentation called, I can't actually see the slides, signal coverage and interference hunting. And already we've talked about the fans at the warehouse emitting signals right in the middle of the band. You know, from all my previous experience, fluorescent light tubes, LED displays. I've even seen digital clocks on the wall interfere with the cellular bands. So interference is a big deal. It stops us from doing what we need to do most, and that's to communicate, especially with the types of communications that you're involved in when a lot of it's issues of public safety. So hopefully you'll find this entertaining and enriching. Can I have the next slide? So I'll cover basics, just one quick slide. So does anybody know what a spectrum analyzer is? Oh yes. I've worked on spectrum analyzers now for 30 years, and I love them. And I've you know, worked on all sorts of spectrum analyzers, from lab ones to field portables. And at Tektronix we have both models. I'll try and keep it to the field portable units today. So we'll cover that. And then I'm going to talk about some signal detection techniques and coverage mapping and interference hunting, specifically the subjects I'd like to talk about there. And then signal location techniques, so mapping, triangulation, and how you would log that as well. Next slide. So what is interference? Could anybody tell me what interference is? Don't be shy. How about a big fan in a warehouse? That was our first example today. Is there any other types of interference that get you down?
LED light boards.
LED light boards, exactly. Illegal radio operators as well is another one that can interfere in the bands, especially in VHF, UHF, or down below HF bands. So it stops us doing what we want to do. Next slide. interference comes in many forms as well. So it's not just only an illegal transmitter. We can also get a transmitter modulating with or mixing with a nonlinear device like a rusty piece of metal that contains nonlinear. That's essentially a nonlinear device, and we all know a mixer is a nonlinear device. So we'll create extra products by that effect alone. And I think the people who are working in FirstNet now will should have a reasonable amount of headaches with passive intermodulation, because you've got the cellular bands all intermodulating down into the FirstNet band, which causes a whole other range of interference as well. I'll go to the next slide to keep it going. You also want to be geo-aware. It's great to say, oh, I got some interference, but if you can't say where the interference is, what direction the interference is, and what power the interference is, you can't take the next step. Ultimately, you would go to if the person who has the interference is not cooperative, you would ultimately have to end up going to the FCC with a written report about where the interference is. So we've got the tools that help you do the geolocation and actually the direction and type of interference as well. Next slide. So on these two displays here that you can see on the screen, we've got two types of display. And for those of you familiar with spectrum analysis and radio receivers, if you're a ham radio operator, you'll be familiar with the spectrogram and the spectrum display. So, the core essence of this talk really is about how do we spot time varying signals in the frequency domain. If you remember, a lot of the things that we see are not there all the time. You could chance upon it by looking at the spectrum and saying, oh, what was that? And then it's gone. Right? So things like a spectrogram help us log things over time, and things like what we call the DPX technology in our spectrum analyzer actually emulate the old phosphor screen. So if anybody's familiar with an analog oscilloscope back in the day, you would fire the electrons at the screen, the phosphor would illuminate, and then the phosphor would, decrease illumination over time. But that gave you a lot more in-depth into what was going on in the signal. And over the years, we've taken that phosphor knowledge, because actually, just to say again, Tektronix not only invented the oscilloscope and trigger, but we also created a lot more innovations on perfecting the phosphor decay on an old analog oscilloscope. And over the years now, we've converted all that knowledge into some digital signal processing that allows us to emulate that now on an LCD. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You seem quite excited about this. Next slide. So let's go in. Let's carry on. So spectrum analyzer. A spectrum analyzer fundamentally displays amplitude on the vertical axis, frequency on the horizontal axis. And you can measure the power of any carrier. And according to Fourier, you can display any time domain varying signal by the component parts or by the individual sine waves that make up that complex signal. And essentially, a spectrum analyzer pulls any time varying signal apart, complex piece of modulation, and shows the individual spectral components. It's as simple as that. Next one. So when you use your spectrum analyzer, you usually see a display like this. It's a frequency versus time. Frequency and amplitude display. You can look at it, look at the specific band you're interested in. You can use some markers, do some measurements, select different types of resolution bandwidth for noise sensitivity or selectivity. And so it looks like that. But if you go to the next slide, carry on. Yeah, let's leave it there. Next one. I just talked about them, but they're on the slide here. Resolution bandwidth filter. That's your selectivity control. It's a radio receiver at the end of the day, so the more selective you want to be, the more you want to zoom in something, the narrower the resolution bandwidth filter you use. But don't forget, spectrum analyzer traditionally as well is a swept device, so that resolution bandwidth filter is going to sweep across the spectrum that you're interested is going to display the power at each sweep point, and that's what makes it that spectrum display. Center frequency is usually center of the carrier of interest at the center frequency. You've got a start frequency, you've got a stop frequency, and then the reference level is usually helps to set the attenuator at the front of the spectrum analyzer, so you're not overdriving the spectrum analyzer, because don't forget, right? Not only will you get intermodulation from nonlinear devices such as rusty ironwork, you can actually put too much signal in the spectrum analyzer, overdrive the mixer, and you'll get a whole other bunch of intermodulation products. So you've got to be careful with your signal levels as well. Next one. So I briefly talked, I only have half an hour, so I'm trying to go as fast or as slow as I can, but I've already talked about the resonant filter. That's your selectivity. It helps you discriminate between one frequency and another frequency. Next one. One of the things, though, with the spectrum analyzer, and it goes back to filters and the Q of the filter. You're going to sweep this filter across a band, right? The filter has to charge with RF energy, right? And the more you make the filter smaller, the more selective you get, the more charge time that filter requires. Okay, so you'll make the filter smaller, the noise power will drop inside the filter, so your noise score on the spectrum analyzer is going to drop down, right? But it's going to take a longer time to charge that filter. So the more sensitive you make the spectrum analyzer and the more selective it is, you'll notice that the sweep speed of the analyzer is going to start to get very slow. Now that's not so good if you've got a time varying signal, because when the spectrum analyzer is at this point in the sweep and your carrier frequency that you're interested in is over here and it's switching on and off in an intermittent way, you're not going to see it. We usually call that the probability of intercept, by the way. What is the probability that the spectrum analyzer is going to see a signal of interest that has a time varying behavior? Next one. Carry on. So this is this graph actually shows you some of the numbers of how sweep time varies for different resolution bandwidths. We have this technology, and this is where it comes into the Tektronix advertisement. We have this technology called real-time spectrum analysis, and one of the key things that it does is it first speeds up that filter, because we're actually sucking in a large amount of bandwidth, based on our oscilloscope technology. We're taking in, say, 40 megs of bandwidth instantaneously, and then we've got a ton of back-end processing where we implement all the filters digitally, and we overdrive the speed of the filters. And sometimes we sweep the filters too fast, which is fine, because we then add a correction in to make them go through to produce the correct amplitude. So we can oversweep, we can sweep fast, and sweep time now becomes a function of FFT processing as well. So, the more powerful the computer is, the faster you can do your sweeps. Next one. So here's an example now of a regular spectrum. The device actually shows a regular spectrum and the DPX spectrum as well. But you can see with the two things is that we're sweeping a lot faster, and so that's a colourful display, and we're doing our digital phosphor emulation. So now the screen has memory. Instead of sweep, delete, sweep, delete, sweep, delete, sweep, delete, which is how a regular spectrum analyzer works. Or you could do peak search, and then you would get an envelope in a regular spectrum analyzer. What we're doing is sweep decay, sweep decay, sweep decay, and the algorithm, always remembers which was the most frequent and does the decay over tens of thousands of different acquisitions. So you get this memory effect now in your spectrum analysis, which really allows you to get that next level of insight. Next one. Next one. So this is great, isn't it? So the display on one side, actually, which is that's the right hand side. So the display on the right hand side is regular spectrum analysis, and it's the wireless. It's I think it's the unregulated band, 2.4 band. And that's just full of rubbish. That's an English phrase. I am American, by the way, but I grew up in England. And you can't see anything because the signals are switching on and off at such a rate that the probability of intercept is 0. Right? But when you use the digital phosphor and the fast acquisition, what it does, it picks all these signals up and then it slowly starts to decay them over time. So a blue signal means it's not been there for a long time. A green signal means it's there for a long time. So that's what you're seeing. And the colors vary as well. Like red means it's always there. You know, yellow means it's sometimes there. Green means it's sometimes there. And blue means it's rarely appearing. It's those things that rarely appear is the things that are going to really cause you trouble when you get into that deeper level of interference hunting. And also signal coverage as well, because sometimes you want to do signal coverage mapping of signals that are not there all the time as well. And just be a little more intelligent about how you do it instead of just putting the peak of the envelope on. Next one. And so we took the DPX then, and we moved that up into spectrogram. So spectrogram also has this decay algorithm that we perfected over the years. You know, a lot of you see these colors on the screens. I mean, if I look at a new icon receiver, it's got a spectrum analyzer display on it. It's got a spectrogram display on it. But I just want to point out the difference between that and a true measuring instrument is that when we do this phosphor decay, it's processed on tens of thousands of acquisitions. So it's really a truer representation of the decay of the signal. And the beauty of the spectrogram that you can see as well is that you can actually see, so it's frequency along the bottom and on the time axis, the vertical is the time axis, so you can see these little bursts of RF power. Some signals are frequency hopping. Bluetooth's a frequency hopping technology. It's just bouncing around the wireless band, the 2.4 ISM band, looking for somewhere where it can survive. You know, it bounces around. And signals that bounce around are always going to be difficult to track down. So you can see the frequencies. You know, the bandwidth and the frequency spacing indicates that that's a frequency hopping signal. If you look there on the display. Next one. So you found something. You found something. You think that's interesting. That shouldn't be there. You can run some algorithms in the instrumentation itself that will do some rudimentary classification. It's a lookup table at the end of the day. If it's a signal of a certain bandwidth, a certain frequency, excuse me, I've got a cold as well. We'll look it up in a table and match the frequency and the modulation width and say, hey, we think this might be an LTE intermod, or it might be you know, an illegal transmitter of this sort. Next one. Action on trigger. Action on trigger. So it's all very good when I say, oh, you'll spot all these intermittent signals, but if you can't actually capture them and log them, then it's pointless. They'll appear on your screen, they'll decay, and they'll be gone forever. So you leave the spectrum analyzer running for a while at a location, and you can actually define actions on triggers. So when you spot a certain amount of RF energy, it'll trigger the system and we'll log it. We'll log it and store it where it needs to be. Next one. And then it just gets better. Then we can log it with the geolocation, because the spectrum analyzer, I didn't bring one by the way, but it's about this big. There's one this big and about one this big, and they carry around in it. One of them has a GPS in it. So you can log it with, you can geo-log whatever you're measuring. Now that is pretty useful for outdoor coverage mapping, but we also have another system as well that allows us to do indoor coverage mapping. So if you've got a safety critical system in the building, which I do know is a regulated test that has to happen once a year or so, you can the vendor who does that can take a spectrum analyzer inside and use some of our more proprietary technology. Take a GPS reading outside, and then it'll use the proprietary technology to figure out what floor it's on, where it is in the building, And so you can go up and down stairwells and get the signal coverage that way as well. Next one. I'll do the next one as well. Triangulation. So, for experienced interference hunters, you usually say, oh, geez, I think that is some cable TV egress, so I'm just going to drive along the road and try and find like a grey box by the side of the road, which is a cable TV junction area, and I can guarantee in that box there's probably some rusty connectors, and it's emitting signals that it shouldn't emit. Sometimes it gets a little harder to actually geolocate. And geolocation is to me sometimes a blend between, you know, forensics, like investigating what are the transmitters nearby, is there a local shop, is there a factory nearby, and pure RF triangulation. The triangulation really helps you to get to the spot a lot quicker. And with the stuff that we've got, you know, we do 1 or 2 or 3 measurements. With the analyzer, you walk around, plot the geolocation. And we have some very directional antennas as well, some logarithmic antenna. We do have a very good logarithmic antenna that you can carry around. It has a compass on it as well, and a laser beam. So you can actually point it to specific devices. Carry on. Oh, this goes into the antenna type. So for those of you who know about antennas, which I would think quite a lot of you, you know, it's got to be a Yagi or a logarithmic antenna. So we do both of them with the spectrum analyzers. For basic signal coverage, like last week I went with AT&T to AT&T Park, and we did coverage mapping of the wireless LAN band, the 5G wireless LAN band. Has anybody been to AT&T Park in San Francisco? Do you know there are 2,000 wireless access points in that stadium? 900 of them are shared with cellular. Do you know where they keep them? They're under the seats. So always look under your seat and check you've not got a hot seat. That's an interesting fact today. So anyhow, as you know, you need an antenna with high directivity, so with a good gain in the signal direction to be able to geolocate. Next one. Yeah, that's just more antenna theory. So here's an example of this is actually the Tektronix campus in Beaverton, Oregon. And what we did was we just walked around a broader circle, and with the logarithmic antenna that we've got with the trigger, by the way, it's got a trigger on it, and we did decide we don't use that when we go to public places, by the way, because it freaks everybody out. Because it's a big black thing with a big pointy antenna and a trigger. It's like a laser gun. But anyhow, putting that to one side. We can walk around a large area. Sometimes we put it in a cardboard box, by the way, and carry the cardboard box around, so nobody sees the antenna, so they don't get freaked out. But you pull the trigger, and it'll geolocate the power and your GPS position, and then once we've got 3, we put it into the mapping software there, and you get that exact triangulation that you need. Next one. Here's a tip. I decided to put this in as a tip. So these a good logarithmic antenna is a lot of money. A good Yagi is a lot of money. But you can use basically a basic dipole antenna, one of those rubber ones, as you can see on the drawing either side. If you hold the spectrum analyzer here, I know it's a bad thing to say, but you're getting exposed to the RF anyhow. But you can use your body as a shield to keep you close, and you can do the geolocation that way as well. So you from the dome up, you're actually kind of getting an antenna pattern that goes this way a little bit. So it's up to. Next one, yeah. So to conclude, I've told you about real-time spectrum analysis and what the difference is between a regular spectrum analyzer and real-time one in terms of multiple processing, screen decay, large bandwidth acquisition. And then we've looked at some of the coverage mapping capability that we've added to that real-time spectrum analysis. And then I briefly covered on on some geolocation stuff, and hopefully gave you the gift of the body shield and a regular antenna. So that ends my speech for today. Any questions, by the way? Yes?
What does using your body as a shield do for searching for that signal?
Well, if you go back a couple of the slides, that's your dipole antenna pattern, right? So if you've got, your analyzer with an antenna on it out here, you're not going to get a geolocation. But if you drag it closer to you, what happens then is the RF energy that's behind you is going to be blocked by your body. So you just get then a more directed pattern of essentially the donut, part of the donut that's just going forward. So it's just a little cost-saving technique, because it's not going to kill you because you're already exposed to the RF energy. Remembering that the spectrum analyzer is just a receiver. It could kill you if you're too close to the source. Or hurt you over time. Anyway, yes, sir.
Can we demo one of those units? I'd love to try with that.
Yes, certainly.
We do a lot of it here in fact.
Yeah, and you were in San Francisco, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah. So we will exchange cards and we can do that. Some hands went up over here. Yes, sir.
Is this proprietary? Is the stuff you're talking about, is this all proprietary to Tektronix? Is this your guys' stuff or are there other vendors?
DPX is all Tektronix. I was at I do a lot of RF for the government. I was at an electronic warfare conference the other day, and one of our competitors came over and said, "You guys created a monster with the DPX technology. There's now thousands of emulations of what DPX looks like, but it's still not the true DPX with the depth of analysis that Tektronix, spent 50 or 60 years developing." The answer to the question is, yeah, but they're poor imitations. Any other questions? All right, well, it was a pleasure to present for you today, and I hope you enjoyed this speech.
Okay, coming up on 10 minutes to 11, Keynote, Chief Howland is at 11. So go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and everybody come back at 11. If you haven't dropped off your ballots, please do so first thing, so we can count them and be ready to announce the results. Thank you.
I have a feeling.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time with the operations. Probably, yeah. No. Okay, thank you. There's a short. Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, 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 just let me know, yeah. Either grab me or fly in, I'm gonna go back. Anybody? Yeah.
Workers' comp.
Oh, sure, it's gonna be a
Thanks for a great presentation. Which area do you come from? Where do you come from? Yeah, also my family. I'm American too. Most people think it's fun. But anyway, so my question is, when we go closer to they denied what they were doing, they wanted to stop. But so my question is, so I was going to ask a question about that. What I will ask you is, so in building, when you see some proprietary information, you're looking inside the building, so do you do essentially an 18 years or some kind of reference file
Sign up first. And I was trying to remember if I was in station, so I just said,
When I go to Ember County, I pretty much stay on the Highway 49 corridor, so.
it was developed by MIT.
About higher elevations. You know, the county. I'm doing good, Dave. Oh, good.
It's pretty cool, you know. You actually see what's pretty long numbers.
I was watching TV show last night. Showing their course.
Yeah. It just, you know, all the toys and stuff that he loves playing with. Some of that stuff I grew up
It's so nice to see you, man. Good to see you.
As soon as many of you know, Art McDowell passed away a number of years ago, and Chris Thompson and I had the opportunity to go into Art's old office at his home and collect all of his APCO items. And some of the stuff ended up in my possession. As we're going through a major remodel of our office, I happened upon a box of old things, and in it is an actual copy of the APCO bulletin from April 1945. And it has some interesting things in it, including California, here we come, and maybe at a different time. Excuse me, I'm starting to come down with a cold as well. We'll read some of that as the CPRA chapter was being accepted into the APCO family immediately after the Northern California Police Communications Officers was joined into APCO, so we're actually being CPRA, even though CPRA was formed first, we were APCO members before that. But the thing that caught my attention was the advertisement on the back. And you can see it's from one of our sponsors, 1945. California's mountains and valleys are tough, but not for Motorola FM radio. California's 158,693 square miles and 117,760 miles of roadways, with mountains like Mount Whitney, 14,498 feet above sea level, and valleys like Death Valley, 300 feet below sea level, presented problems in statewide coverage by radio telephone that were super tough. Nevertheless, by the use of Motorola radio telephone FM units and Motorola radio automatic relay stations, the California State Highway Patrol has excellent radio telephone communications with the 485 two-way patrol cars and the 377 one-way motorcycles patrolling California's 58 counties. Your state, county, city, or community should take advantage of the skill and experience that Motorola radio engineers have displayed in installing FM two-way and three-way radio telephone systems in 33 states, over 1,000 communities throughout the United States, the Canal Zone, and Hawaiian Islands. With that, I will turn it over to Chief Howland to give us an update on what they've been able to do since 1945.
Okay, I'm still trying to figure out what a three-way radio is. Is that like a party line? Who knows? Who knows? Well, I'm happy to say a couple things may have changed since that long ago from that standpoint. But good morning. How is everybody today? I'm excited to be here. You're a great group. So how many of you guys are frequent flyers? All right, a good crowd of frequent flyers. And in this situation, it's good. Typically with the highway patrol, frequent flyer is bad. Just so you know. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Chief Scott Howland, Chief of the California Highway Patrol's Information Management Division. So the quiz for the frequent flyers is how long have I been on the Highway Patrol? Oh, weren't you guys paying attention last night? 28 years. And it's interesting comparing back to the 40s versus 28 years. Even in 28 years, a lot has changed. It's been amazing over the course of my career just to watch technology change, how we use technology, and really how we rely on technology every single day to get our job done. I gotta say it's been about a year, and I'm honored to be back. Although as I was thinking about the invite, I was putting it together because I believe this is about the 4th time I've come to this group. And I was thinking, I'm like, is it suspicious that the only time I'm invited is when we host it? And I was trying to figure out if John may be up to a little bit of trouble, saying, yeah, we'll host it, but my boss has got to do the talking. John, are you up for a promotion or something? No. Just checking. Because John told me that you guys wanted me to come back, so that'll be my assumption there, that you actually wanted to hear me again, as opposed to John holding it over your head saying, hey, I'll give you a place to meet, but I want to make the boss happy and make him think you want to come back. I like giving John a hard time. He does a great job for us, from that standpoint. And like I said, in my role as Information Management Division Chief, I have quite a wide variety of things that I'm responsible for. And so obviously I'm responsible for telecommunications, statewide radio, for the California Highway Patrol. I also get to oversee IT, so I serve the role of the Chief Information Officer from that standpoint. I also oversee statewide traffic records and our communications support section, and we oversee 24 communication centers statewide from that standpoint. And if that's not enough, I also oversee our computer crimes investigations unit. And so I always joke that I'm the paranoid CIO because I worry about the CHP, but I also get to see what happens other places. And my guys only get called when a crime has occurred, meaning bad stuff has happened. So it kind of helps keep me honest and keeps me a little paranoid from the standpoint of how do we enhance security. And we'll talk a little bit about security in a few minutes and the importance of that. But this morning I want to cover a couple things. And I realize that I'm between you and lunch, and I always hate it when they bring lunch in early, but I'm going to test you guys to see if you actually pay attention, because I'm going to do the more technical presentation. The prior presentation was just a warm-up for me. But actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the importance of communication. And I think this is an audience that totally appreciates it and knows and understands that.
I'm going to give you an overview of the CHP and our communications, and even those that are frequent flyers will probably learn something today. I'm going to update you on a few of our projects that we're working on. We have some really cool stuff that's going on. And then I also want to talk about leadership for a minute and hopefully provide you guys some inspiration. And if you're good with it, I might toss in a story or two because that's always fun as far as how things go. And with that, I think I'll just start with a story. So an interesting thing happened to me just last night. Every so often, I decide I'm going to grab a black and white patrol car and go cruise the highways. And so last night, I was in a black and white Dodge Charger, and it wasn't an all white or anything else. It was a black and white Dodge Charger, light bar on top, and of course, when it's dark, we have our reflective highway patrol in the back, which is like a beacon. My headlight hits that thing, you can see highway patrol for miles. So commute's getting over, traffic's finally starting to move, traffic's loosening up and opening up a little bit, and I'm in the number 2 lane, and our lanes go left to right. One is the carpool lane, I'm in the 2 lane, and we're going about 65 miles an hour, the limit. I was quite pleased, traffic's doing the limit, everything's good, and then a Dodge Challenger showed up. and he decided that 65 wasn't fast enough. And he was weaving in and out to the 3, the 4, the 2, the 3, the 4, and he passed me doing 80.
Yeah.
And you can guess where this story goes. I had to exercise my emergency lights. So we stopped, and of course, he gave me the sad story. I'm late to pick up my mom. Well, he won't be. He'll leave a little earlier next time. And we came away with a little agreement that he was going to be slowing down. And of course, the interesting note of the story is I said, "Did you see me when you passed me?" And he looked at me, and I'm like, "Yeah, you passed me." He looked a little fearful when he realized that. But then, of course, I got to toss in a traffic safety message. You know, CHP, you're going to hear traffic safety messages. So, of course, the moral of that story is you need to slow down. And of course, the moral he didn't quite understand is if the highway patrol is going the speed limit, don't pass them at 80. One of the things that I'm working on with my staff is really trying to connect my professional support staff to the mission of the California Highway Patrol. And I had this crazy idea that I could use the medium of video to help with that process. And so we have actually launched on a project to try and really connect the role that officers do and the support role that my professional staff does to really show that it's a team effort in that. And last week, as part of that project, I had my lieutenant call the South Sac office and ask for a volunteer. And of course, the volunteer in the highway patrol goes like this. The captain says, "Hey, officer, I got a job for you." And so Bernie Vincente, an officer from South Sac, shows up at my office, not really knowing what in the world he's gotten himself into. And so poor Bernie has a division chief right along with him and says, "Hey, we're just going to go talk about radios and go do a little work." And he's like, "All right." And part of what I did was I did an interview with Bernie, and I said, "Hey, how important is radio to the work you do every day?" And you can imagine what Bernie told me. And then I spent a little time, and I know it'll be shocking, a little bit of time sharing with Bernie all the support people at headquarters and across the state that work to ensure his radio works every single day. And needless to say, it was eye-opening for Bernie because he'd never really given it much thought about how many people are in the background working to make sure that his radio works every single day. I know you guys totally get it, but to Bernie it was a new concept because he just relied on his radio every single day. And while I don't have the entire project done, I do have the interview with Bernie that I wanted to share with you this morning. So I'm going to test and see if my clicker actually works. Jason's going to get the lights, and let's see Bernie.
One of the more important pieces of technology for us to use on a daily basis, I would have to say, would be our radio. Our radio is our first line of communication to dispatch. It allows us to get the adequate resources, to communicate with dispatch, communicate with our other units, and also go through dispatch, communicate with our ally agencies. So with them, we're able to coordinate and respond appropriately to whatever instance we have. And ultimately, it's our like a lifeline. If I need help, I need to be able to communicate that directly to dispatch so she can provide all the other units how to get to me so that we could all go home at the end of the day. I actually did not know what all you guys do behind the scenes as far as your duties and your job on a day-to-day basis. And I want to say a big thank you for the job that you do, because without you guys, I'm not able to do my job as safely as efficiently as I do on a daily basis. And this truly is a team effort in order to provide the safety and services to people in California.
Do you think Bernie's right on? He absolutely is right on. And I mean, I think he summed it up really well from the standpoint. It's our connection to dispatch. That radio is that connection. It is the way that our public responders, whether it be CHP, police, sheriff, EMS, fire, that's how they get the resources they need to get the job done. As Bernie said, it's his lifeline. When he needs help, he's using his radio to get help. And that dispatcher is going to send the cavalry. But the last thing he said, I think, is the most important. What was the last thing he said? Team effort. Absolutely. It's the team effort working together. Because he could have a radio and a dispatcher could have a console, but if the stuff in the middle doesn't work, it's useless. And you guys know that because you guys take care of that stuff. It's a team effort to ensure we have public safety. The other thing that my video concept's going to include in the future is I'm doing some interviews with my support staff, so that if an officer sees this, they can see all the different roles and responsibilities of our support staff. And my little adventure, my little project took me out to the Sacramento Communications Center on Monday, and I sat down with one of our dispatchers, Amy, to get some shots. As a matter of fact, you saw her in the video at that console, but it reminded me how amazing our dispatchers are. Because as I was sitting there, a pursuit comes out in Norsac. And I was sitting there talking to Amy, and as soon as that pursuit comes out, I didn't exist. She was engaged in that pursuit, getting the information, getting additional people there, so that that officer had all the resources that officer needed to successfully resolve that. Of course, the funny part of the story is that the officer didn't mention at the beginning when he put out the pursuit that it was the pursuit of a bicycle. So of course that little detail got Amy and I totally cracking up because, you know, what did we visualize? We visualized a car sideways around a corner going 100 miles an hour, and then it was a guy on a bicycle with a red sweatshirt. And the funny thing is, all the neighbors were calling because he was trying to ditch down an alley, and they found him because of all the additional folks that called 911, which then we use the communication system, push the information out to say, hey, you want to check here because that's where he is. And so I know you guys appreciate the work that you do, and I think it's important to just say thank you for the work that you guys do to support public safety communications, because you're the ones that make communications happen 24/7. Without you, that stuff doesn't work and we don't communicate, even if it's a three-way Motorola whatever, from that standpoint. So how many of you guys are dispatchers? Any dispatchers? Right on. Okay, you guys rock. I just need to say that right on. You guys rock. How many of you guys work telecommunications on the technical side? Okay, majority of you. How many of you guys are vendors? Okay. No, that's good too. I appreciate the vendors. Yes, I did say that. I appreciate the vendors because you guys provide the technology that we need to implement. You also help educate us on the technology we need to implement, and you guys are a partner for us, and we rely on you guys. So thank you for providing the technology you did. And then how many of you guys didn't raise your hand? Okay, you guys are honest. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. I won't point you out, but oh, sorry, you already did. One of the things I always say is that as the CIO for the CHP over telecommunications, I'm not in IT, and I'm not in the business of telecommunications. I'm in the business of law enforcement, providing safety and service to people in California. And my team that supports telecommunications, my team that supports IT, they're in the law enforcement business too, providing safety and service every day. And I think it's really important from the technical side to remember that, because a lot of times, and I do the same thing, we get so wound up in our technology that we forget why we're doing the job. And it's the why that's the most important part. Because when you remember why we're doing it, all of a sudden that work has so much more meaning than it does if we're just wrapped in the technology from that standpoint. So how many of my own folks do I have here? Oh, they all left. No, I got John, a couple people hiding in the corner. How many folks from OAS PSC? And I point you guys out and want to say thank you to you guys because you support the CHP directly every single day. But as I think about the rest of you, you all have agencies that you're aligned with that you support every single day. And in some cases, you're supporting me and I'm supporting you in the work that we do. And so thank you for the work that you do to support the role of public safety every day. So now I want to talk a little bit about the CHP, provide a quick overview, and even frequent flyers. I think you're going to learn something, at least I hope you do. So the basics of the mission of the California Highway Patrol is to provide the highest level of safety, service, and security to the people in California. And when you look at the organization of the CHP, we've got almost 11,000 employees across the state. And when you look at that map, it shows how we're split up. I have 8 field divisions. Within each field division, there's an area office. And I've got 103 area offices. Additionally, 16 commercial enforcement facilities. Additionally, 24 communication centers. With that, I also have our headquarters here that you're in. We have our academy in West Sacramento. We have our fleet ops where we build all our cars in West Sacramento. And then I got a bunch of other miscellaneous stuff. And so by the time all the dust settles, I got over 150 locations that I physically have people from that standpoint. And then when you look at our 11,000 employees, 7,600 are dressed just like me. We're very consistent in how we dress, all in tan. Except if we have a natural disaster, then we go to blue because tan soil is a little easy. So want to make sure we keep our uniforms clean. And then we have 3,300 professional staff. And I'll tell you, I love our 3,300 professional staff because without them, the Highway Patrol doesn't work. None of our technology would work. We wouldn't have patrol cars. No one would get a paycheck. Nothing would happen in the Highway Patrol without the support staff. And I think the irony is when the public thinks of the Highway Patrol, what do they think of? The uniform in a black and white patrol car, not recognizing that if I don't have a dispatcher, that officer doesn't know where to go and can't get the help they need to get something resolved. If we don't have telecommunications, our radio doesn't work, and we don't have communications, and the list goes on. And so I always like to recognize how important our professional staff are. So let's talk about what the Highway Patrol does every year. We make over 3.7 million public contacts every year. We make about 1.5 million arrests. Now, a traffic ticket is considered an arrest, so the majority of that 1.5 million are tickets. Just to clarify, we're not taking 1.5 million people to jail. Some people get confused with that. We make nearly 7,300 felony arrests. Those are the super bad guys. They go to jail. We answered about 9.2 million 911 calls. That is a lot of phone calls. More than 498,000 trucks inspected, 398,000 equipment violations, and 15.6 million trucks were weighed. A couple other interesting perspectives of our total jurisdiction is 106,000 miles of roadway across the state. That's a lot of road to travel. Another very interesting thing is, you know how many miles our enforcement vehicles travel every year? About 80.9 million miles. I mean, you just think about that for a minute. 80.9 million miles, that's a lot of driving. Oh wait, that's why I joined the Highway Patrol, so I guess that's okay. And then of course the other thing to realize is that all our work isn't tickets, because you look at 1.5 million arrests, guess how many warnings we give it? 1 million warnings. And 1.1 million motor services. There's a lot of contact we have. But I share those stats because I want you to think about those stats and how often do we need a radio when we do any of that work? Just about every single one of them. There's radio implications to everything that we do. It's a critical component of our work and how we do it. And it's interesting when you think about the importance of radios. It's one of the things that, man, I'll tell you, in my car, I totally appreciate having a radio. If you talk to my staff, they'll describe me when I'm out in my car as a black cloud. Somehow I attract stuff. And so let me just share what last week looked like trying to go home in my unmarked car. 4 of 5 nights, I'm taking traffic collisions and moving them out of the roadway because they're blocking lanes. And on Wednesday night, as I'm cruising along, traffic almost comes to a stop. I can see cars going around up ahead. I'm thinking, oh, another crash. And I get there, and of course there's debris in the roadway, and everybody's trying to go on the roadway. So I stop, I turn on my emergency lights, and we have those cool arrow boards in the back that indicate which way we'd like cars to go. I turn that on, I get out, and I'm just going to stop and have a quiz. So if I turn on my arrow, and my arrow's pointing right, what direction do you think I would like you to go? To the right.
Right, okay. So I'm just checking, because here's what happened to me. I pull up in the number 1 lane, the far left lane. So how many options do you have on where to go? You got one option. I turn on my arrow just in case someone is confused. So reinforce the one option to go to the right. And guess what the first guy behind me tries to do? As I'm getting out of my car into the center divider, he decides it would be fun to drive around my car to the left into the center divider. Well, I had my flashlight and got his attention very quickly. And quickly redirected him to the proper way to go. And finally got the guy going to the right. It turns out it was a lady and her infant, an 11-month-old infant, cute little girl, in a car seat in a Toyota 4Runner that the back end just got smashed in, glass went everywhere. They pulled to the center divider, checked on him, and mom, of course, was very upset, a little freaked out. And of course, the infant, happy as a clam. Mom was climbing in the back seat when I got there. I poked my head in. The infant thought I was just the greatest thing. She looked at me and gave me a big old smile. I'm sure it was my good looks. And of course, the fact that the infant was so calm and so good, I was able to reassure mom that, hey, trust me, if she was hurt, she would let us know. But I used my radio to get paramedics there to ensure we got the baby checked out and everybody okay from that standpoint. But I'll tell you, I appreciate having that radio because unfortunately with my black cloud, I use it a lot. So let's talk about our radio infrastructure for a minute. So when we look at our radio infrastructure, we have got 24 dispatchers where we handle millions of 911 calls. We've got 420 radio sites across the state where we have low band radio. Okay, our 1943 quiz, how many radio sites did we have? Was it 420?
483 cars.
483 cars. Did it say how many radio sites?
No.
Yeah, probably 24. Well, the interesting thing is we have as many radio sites as we had cars back then, from that standpoint. But when you think of the coverage that we need to have as a statewide organization, it's amazing how much infrastructure there is to support it and what that communications infrastructure looks like across the state. And then 57 of those sites have UHF, and we use UHF for our digging area protection, some of our undercover work, some of our investigative services units from that standpoint. And that UHF is actually the old state police radio system that the CHP and the state police merged back in 1995, and so we're one organization. And for those of you who've always scratched your head of why the CHP guards the Capitol, that's why, because we merged with the California State Police. Now let's take a look at our fleet. It was 453 cars?
485.
485. Man, I can't get that number right. 485 cars. So we fast forward to today, we've got 2,436. We call them our consolidated patrol vehicle environment. Translated, that means black and white patrol cars. So we've grown just slightly, actually quite a bit. Motorcycles, 411. Meat and SWAT, kind of our specialty vehicles, we've got 54 of those. 185 commander cars, 273 undercover, 53 dignitary protection. We've got our 2 mobile communications command trailers, and then we've got 9 RRVs, which is a Chevy Tahoe packed with radio equipment for interoperability purposes with that. But we've come a long way, and we continue to build and continue to improve our communications as we go. I want to give you a couple project updates. One of the updates that I talked about previously was the phone system replacement of our communication centers. And we had started that project a couple years ago, and this summer we finished updating our phone systems across the state. We have a Vesta phone system. And then the other really cool thing that we were able finally to do, and we just finished the last comm center, is we turned on automatic callback feature. So those that work in the comm center realize how valuable this tool is, because when we receive a 911 call that is a hang-up, many are just butt dials, or I'm testing my phone, or whatever the case may be, a dispatcher has to take the time to call them back to ensure there's not an emergency. We're now using technology to make that phone call back, and the person hears, you call 911, if you have an emergency, press an E button. And if they press a button, it'll be transferred to the dispatcher. If they don't press anything, we know it wasn't an emergency, and we freed up valuable time so we can actually answer legitimate 911 calls, as opposed to calling back butt dials and finding out, ooh, it was accidental, sorry about that, and meanwhile I got someone else ringing trying to get help that I needed. And so it's been a tremendous help to actually implement that, and technology is really working there.
Now here's our next project. I think some of you guys are going to geek out on, and that is our radio console update project. And I'll read some of the specs for it because I know some of you guys want to geek out on that, and that's okay. The Intertalk system by Cantel is our new. Or did I go too far? There we go. Man, my clicker's sensitive. Sorry about that. It's IP-based, allows adjacent centers to handle workload. Think about that for a minute. I've got 24 communication centers. If I have a bomb threat, evacuation, or something else in one of those centers, and I need to have everybody leave, the only alternative I have is a base station and an area office. That base station does not use all my towers, which means I have limited communications capabilities. With this system, if I have to evacuate SATCOM center, I can take those radio positions and push them to a different center and dispatch from a different center, which means I have full communications capabilities even if I have to evacuate one of my comm centers. And so I'm really excited about that potential because it keeps us moving even when we have issues that happen at comm centers. Improved vote steer efficiency included the voice over IP, radio over IP, improved audio routing, telephone paging capabilities, intercoms, emergency notification. For those with larger centers, you realize that, hey, when you have an emergency going and you want someone on a backup to do it, our current system is, hey, we find out an emergency is going, and then the dispatcher who's going to be backing up that primary dispatcher has to figure out what channel, pull up that channel, and everything else. This system automatically sends a notification, and if you say, yes, I want to back that one up, it pulls up the right channel for you immediately. And so it just makes us connect much quicker and provide better operations within it. The other interesting thing is it provides consistency and it gets rid of some of our outdated consoles. I know our PSC folks will concur that we have a number of consoles that we do not ever want to turn off because we're afraid they will not turn back on. Yes, and I hate to say our oldest one goes back to 1994, and you probably don't remember the Windows version it's running on because it's so old. I'll just leave it at that. So we're excited to update. It's going to give us the capability to do analog and P25, and again, during emergencies, that backup portion is good. So far we've completed Sacramento, our Capital Communication Center, and our Emergency Notification and Tactical Alert Center that's right here on campus. And then for this fiscal year, we're going to be doing 8. We're going to do Stockton, Chico, Reading, Eureka, Ukiah, Wairika, Susanville, and Golden Gate. And then we're going to do 2 additional years to roll out the rest of our communication centers. Now, I'm surprised none of you have called me on the fact that last time I talked to you, I said we had 25 comm centers. You guys weren't taking thorough notes. We're down to 24, actually. One of the things we ended up doing is we ended up consolidating Truckee with Chico, and so we moved our Truckee operations to Chico. Chico's got a new, beautiful facility and is taking care of dispatching for Truckee, so we did some consolidation there from that standpoint. Heavy lift, thank you PSC for all your work on that, because as you know, with dispatch centers, there's a whole lot of stuff to move, and we've got to make sure it keeps working. Another interesting project we rolled out this year was tablets for our motorcycles. We never had data connectivity with our motorcycles before. And so what we ended up doing is we ended up buying a ruggedized Panasonic tablet for each of our motorcycle officers. And that tablet includes a scanner, magnetic strip reader, camera, biometric, fingerprint reader, and cellular connectivity. And ultimately, it gives my motorcycle officers the capability to do anything a car cop can do. In the past, the cars were the only folks with mobile digital computers. And of course, I worry about some of our motors sometimes because a few have said, hey, I never have to talk to dispatch anymore because I can do everything on my tablet. And the joke with motors is sometimes you can't get a hold of them, and I'm really not sure it's a radio issue, if you know what I mean. We'll just leave it at that. Other thing I wanted to provide was a quick update on FirstNet. Now, okay, I got Kevin and Scott. Any other FirstNet folks here?
Who's bigger?
All right, we got 3. Right on. So I'm on the FirstNet board for California, and we had a board meeting yesterday, so I think I got fresh updated information, but I'm sure my FirstNet folks will correct me if my update needs to be updated, but it hasn't been 24 hours, so I think I can be pretty accurate. At least I'm watching Kevin, so we'll see how I do here. So the good news is anybody who wants to go to FirstNet, there's now a California contract on CalNet that was signed October 24th to make the transition very easy. I was glad to see that so that it would enable me to actually easily get there, because in government, contract vehicles are everything. If you don't have the right contract vehicle, forget it. You're not getting whatever you want. Other thing is AT&T is actually progressing quite well with their build-out. They've installed 73 new sites, and they have 696 with Band 14 already. I was actually very impressed with the progress that they're making from that standpoint. That I thought the Band 14, obviously it takes time for that build-out, but they're making good progress on that build-out. The other thing that's been interesting is really understanding device options, because if you're looking at FirstNet, there's a couple ways you can approach it. Because there is a orange SIM, which is the commercial rollover account, which, so for example, my AT&T modems, I can move to FirstNet by just rolling over that account and leaving that SIM card in the modem without doing anything. I also have the option of getting a black SIM card or a FirstNet SIM card, which then gives me additional features. But remember how many cars I have? Just think about the logistics of trying to get a little SIM card in the right car at 150 locations across the state. Probably take a little planning, a little time, and everything else. So as you can tell, I'm going to start with rolling over my accounts with that. And the main difference between the two is the orange SIM card gives you priority and preemption. So it'll enable you to get on the network, which is good, because if you can't get on the network, you're not getting anything. And then the black SIM card provides a couple additional things. It gives you the Band 14 device-dependent capabilities, gives priority preemption uplift, but there are some limitations. And this is where I can see if FirstNet's going to correct me or not. I think I'm right on as far as accuracy. So if you look at this slide, there's a couple features that they're still refining and finishing, and they'll be rolling out as time goes forward. But I'm just going to use one of them as an example, Wi-Fi calling. So if you have an orange SIM card in your phone, you can do Wi-Fi calling. If you put a black FirstNet in your phone today, that feature's not enabled. It will in the future, but it's not enabled. And so it's interesting as you look at it, really timing when you want to move to what. And that's why I wanted to point out Kevin and Scott, because they are willing to come sit down with your agency and walk you through the process to figure out, are you even using any of those features? And does it matter? And if you are, try and figure out, hey, do you roll a commercial account like I am and then eventually go to a black SIM, or do you go immediately to a black SIM with that standpoint? And it's interesting because as things progress, we end up with all the features FirstNet is planning to offer in the future. And again, a lot of that stuff takes time, and the build has to occur, but they're making good progress, if that makes sense. And so again, just point out, FirstNet wants to sit down and really walk every agency through that so they understand, hey, what are those features I need? What timing is right for moving where, depending on those folks. The other thing I want to talk about from the standpoint is connectivity. So as I talked about those different projects, our consoles, our motorcycles, FirstNet, it all has to do with connectivity. And connectivity is great as far as making sure that our folks can do their job. But there's also some risks associated with connectivity. And being the IT guy, the paranoid IT guy, I'm always looking at those risks. And I think we as a radio community, we need to ensure that we're paying very close attention to those risks, because the consequences keep getting worse and worse as far as what potentially could happen if we don't do a really good job. And so when you think of a computer breach in the past, what did you think of? Thought of lost credentials, some embarrassment, costing money, and loss of trust if it's a government agency or even a business. But the world has changed. When you look at ransomware, what does ransomware really do to us? It puts us out of business. It impacts us operationally. It impacts our mission. And you think about those government agencies that have been hit recently, the high-profile ransomware attacks, Colorado DOT, City of Atlanta, and recently a jurisdiction in Alaska. The cost to recover was tremendous, but that wasn't the most significant cost. The most significant cost was the loss of operation of that government being able to do its basic core mission and the way it impacted those. And all victims do the best they can to minimize what that operational impact is. But you think about our reliance on technology and our reliance on connected devices. What if I had a ransomware attack on my new radio console? What would that do to me? Operationally, that would kill me. And so as we look at our remote access, and we look at connectivity of all these devices, we've got to make sure we move security to the #1 slot. Because if we don't, we're going to end up being put out of business operationally. And communications is core to what we do in public safety. So when you look at what's called trends in the world, the Verizon breach report, which I always read because they got amazing statistics in it, but of course I'm always depressed when I'm finished reading because of the statistics in it. 40% of all malware out there is now ransomware. 40%. You know how most malware is delivered? Email. 92.4% is delivered in email. So how do we protect ourselves, and how do we ensure that we're not going to become the next victim for ransomware, and that it's not going to impact our systems? It's not going to impact our CAD system. It's not going to impact our console. It's not going to impact our tablets in the field or our patrol cars or our data center. What do we need to do? I have a couple suggestions. First is we need to do vulnerability assessments. And so I've got my own data center, and as we look at all our IT stuff, we have a whole process and specialized tools that all it does is vulnerability assessments. And we run that on a regular basis to say, hey, what did we forget to patch? Where are my threats and where are my risks? And as we look at our communications infrastructure, we have to make sure that we're paying attention to those vulnerabilities. We have to constantly look at those and make sure we address them. Second part is discipline with patching. And I know sometimes in the radio world, we take a look at the new firmware that comes out and we say, hey, what features are they introducing with this new firmware? Or am I even experiencing the problem they're trying to fix? And many times we say, nope, don't need that feature. Nope, I don't have that problem because I'm not using that feature. And what do? We skip the firmware update, and then suddenly we're 10 versions behind, 15 versions behind. But we have to think of security, because many updates, and most updates are really driven by security. And you look at those patches. And the discipline with patching really goes back to, if there's a fix out there, we got to install it. And so, recently, Motorola's Kodiak application came out with a vulnerability. They've issued a patch, and so if you have it, you put the patch in, and you're good. But if you have it and you don't put the patch in, you're not good. And it's one of those things that we need to make sure we're paying attention to those patches and getting those patches in so we're protected. It's kind of like if you leave the door open, the bad guys can just walk right in. And when we become aware of those vulnerabilities, we need to do that. The other thing we need to seriously look at is limited access control. We really need to isolate those systems and evaluate, do I need remote access on that system or not? Who has access to that system? Because as we isolate, we reduce risk. We've got to isolate. The other thing we need to do is we really need to look at credential management as part of that isolation approach. Because when you look at an admin account or accounts that can access a lot of our systems, if we don't protect those well, we're asking for trouble. And so if you have admin accounts that have access to some of our systems, that it's the same account that accesses email, you're crazy. Because I'll tell you, they're after credentials like you would not believe. Matter of fact, we just recently got hit by a phishing attack from a private vendor who lost the credentials, and they're shooting out emails trying to get our credentials from that standpoint. Credential management is critical from that. And then finally, we need to be diligent and make sure that we're addressing those issues that we can. I want to shift gears and talk leadership for a minute. And I hope that over the next few minutes I can inspire you just a little bit. I recently went to a conference, the National Association of State Chief Information Officers, and heard a speaker by the name of Brett Culp. Anybody heard of him? He's a documentary filmmaker. And he loves superheroes. Matter of fact, he did one on Batman and has another superhero film that is pretty cool, actually. And it was interesting because his whole presentation is, how do ordinary people do extraordinary things? And it's pretty amazing when you look at the stories that he has documented in his films and what it really takes to do extraordinary things. And he had 3 points that he shared that I want to share with you. And the first is, stay anchored in a meaningful mission. And you really think about it, each one of us has an incredibly meaningful mission.
Some people are looking for a mission, but if you work in public safety, you don't have to look at all. Because we've got an incredibly meaningful mission to really anchor ourselves to. But it's really important to make sure that we stay anchored and our people stay anchored and don't lose sight of that. How many of you guys remember the story I told probably a year or two ago about, actually it was a public safety communications radio technician and an antenna? I'm going to share that story again. I happened to be in my office one day, actually it was a Saturday, and I looked out my window, and I'm probably the only chief that has a view of a radio tower out my window. And as I look out, I've got some OES radio technicians working on the tower on a Saturday. And so I wandered outside just to say thank you for the work they do. I totally appreciate them working and making sure our radio communications are working. And one of the guys said, hey, can I use your restroom? I'm like, sure, come on in. And as we're walking in, he goes, hey, can I ask you a question? I'm like, sure. He goes, my daughter asked me if my work meant anything, and I didn't know what to say. And I stopped in my track and said, what do you mean you didn't know what to say? He goes, well, all I do is I climb the tower and I put a little antenna up. I just put antennas on towers, that's all I do. And I said, you're thinking of it all wrong. You gotta think about what your antenna does. Think about it. When the public calls 911, where does that call go? Well, it goes to your dispatch center. Exactly. And then a dispatcher, in order to get an officer out to the call, what does that dispatcher do? Well, she uses her radio. She does. And where does that radio signal go? My antenna? Yes. Through your antenna, it gets to the officer responds to the scene, the officer needs additional help, he then goes back through your antenna to get additional help, and the paramedics or the tow truck or the fire or whatever they need shows up. It's your antenna that helps make it all happen. And he lit up like a Christmas tree because he had never connected the work he did with the mission of the California Highway Patrol. We need to make sure our people are grounded in the significant work that they do and realize how important their role is, because they make a difference every single day. And with the videos that I'm trying to make, I'm trying to do that with my own people to remind my own people how important their role is with the California Highway Patrol, and that they contribute to public safety and service every single day with the work that they do. The next thing Brent basically said was, there needs to be hope. Hope is magic. You need to be hopeful of what the future looks like. Is hope always there in public sector? When you toss in bureaucracy, when you toss in lack of resources, when you toss in lack of money and frustration and red tape, it's easy to lose hope, isn't it? But we as leaders need to make sure our folks have hope. We need to get some of that bureaucracy out of the way. We need to make sure we're guiding them in the right direction. And we need to make sure that they understand that we're there to help them move communications forward. And then finally, Brett said, real leadership is inviting people on a mission to do something extraordinary together. And it's really helping our people understand that, hey, we're on this mission to do something great together, and that we're going to go there. And I want to give you an example from Brett's film. And I'm going to show you a clip from his film called Look to the Sky. And it's a collection of stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things. And this is the story of Annalisa. And she is a 13-year-old girl that wanted to make a difference. And she focused on her goal of wanting to raise money for a camp for kids with cancer. So let's take a look at Annalisa's story. Pretty cool story, isn't it? And you think what a 14-year-old did. She just wanted to help kids at camp. $30,000, and her parents are like, whoa! She swam 27 hours and raised over $200,000 when it was all done. Pretty amazing. How'd she do that? Well, she had a meaningful mission, do you agree? She was going to help those kids. And when she was 13 and they said, sorry, you got to be 18, she goes, I'm going to help them anyway. And boy, did she help. She had hope. I mean, as she was swimming across that lake and wanted to give up and everybody thought she was going to give up, she thought about the kids. And she goes, I'm doing it for them because it's meaningful. She had hope. And then she invited others on her mission. She had the team. You really think about it. She had her family, and then she had all those folks in the boat. She had her trainer, and the list just goes on, and supporters and everything else. She had a great team supporting her to accomplish that. And it's through a team effort that she was able to raise $200,000 to help those kids at camp. because she's like, we gotta do something, this is a good thing to camp. I'm still astounded that she was able to swim 27 hours because I have a hard time swimming across a pool, let alone that. But she really showed people that they matter and that people can make a difference. And if you really think about it, each of us work for an organization that has a great mission with resources that says, hey, go make a difference. And so I want to use that story and encourage you guys to keep going. Because when you think about some of the communication and support that our folks do, that you do, that folks that work for you do, it's like being on that lake in the dark. You think about some of the radio infrastructure and the towers and the location of where they are, that's a windy, lonely road to get to the top, and it's a long way away. And you're isolated away from everything else. But that's a meaningful mission because when that radio works, those first responders can get the help they need and help the people that need help out there. And when you work behind the scenes, you don't always get the thank you notes. I know that when I look at the things that we fix for our folks, they take it for granted. But I think we need to think back to what Bernie said earlier. That's my lifeline, and I truly appreciate the work that goes into it because it's a team effort. And again, we need to stay grounded on that mission. As Bernie says, it enables radio's enabled him to do his job. It's his lifeline, and we as a team make a difference to help people. Time for another story? All right, one more story. So when I started my career in downtown Los Angeles, I was patrolling downtown Los Angeles, literally, and it was one of those voluntold days. The sergeant said, Howland, you're doing a ride-along. And it was with a newspaper reporter. So I'm taking this guy on a ride-along, we're out and about, and a motorcycle officer finds a drunk driver. Now, when you find a drunk driver on a motorcycle, you can't get him to jail by yourself. So, of course, I got the call, and I had to transport the drunk driver to jail. And as we were leaving jail, the reporter asked me a question. Hey, how do you find drunk drivers? And my response was, well, they really find us. And that reporter scratched her head, and she really didn't understand. And this is no joke. So I literally leave the jail. I'm trying to get on US 101 in downtown LA, and there's this triangular island right in front of us. So we're sitting at a stop sign trying to go right to get on the freeway. There's an exit that then comes around, and as we're sitting there, second in line to get to the stop sign, this big gold Cadillac ends up on the island. I couldn't have scripted this better. It drives up on the island, pauses for a moment, and then drives off. And my response is, I think we need to stop that guy because we might be onto something. And sure enough, walked up in the car, he had his 16-ounce beer on the center console. He told me he drank 4, which you do a multiplier based on what they tell you. So he had at least 8 if we were lucky. He was blotto, of course, driving on the island, you can imagine. So we took him to jail, and lo and behold, the reporter did understand what I meant after that. Still couldn't believe that I didn't script that somehow. And again, that day I used communications to help me because I needed a tow truck to get out of there. And some days it's little stuff like I need a tow truck for a flat tire. Other days it's big stuff that I got a gnarly head-on collision and I need everybody because we got to get these people out of this car and get them the help they need. How many of you guys remember the bot stop? My bot stop sits on my desk. And the reason I have a bot stop on my desk is to remind me every single day why I do the job that I do. Because when you're sitting behind the desk, you miss the action out in the field. But our work is really, really important. And I have that bot stop sitting there to remind me that I'm there to support the men and women of the California Highway Patrol that spend their whole day out patrolling the highways. That I need to make sure the technology that we give them works, I need to make sure their radios work, and I need to make sure technology makes their job easier and more efficient, not more complicated. So I keep my bot stop on my desk to remind me of why I do the job that I do. It reminds me of the why, the important stuff. And so as I wrap up, I just want to share a couple things to remind you of. And the first is, as Bernie said in the video earlier, it is truly a team effort to provide safety and service. You guys are part of that team, and thank you for the contributions each of you make to safety and service in California every single day. Communications really enable safety. Without communications, we can't get the job done. Communications are critically important. And of course, many of your roles do not get significant recognition because you're behind the scenes. But as Annalise did, think about what you're enabling to get done. That needs to keep us going. And of course, remember, don't text and drive 100% of your attention. You didn't think you were getting away without a traffic safety tip, did ya? Come on. Gotta pay attention to the road so you don't crash, because, you know, those folks that don't pay attention get themselves into trouble. And in closing, I just want to say thank you to each one of you for what you do to contribute to public safety in California. Because it really is truly a team effort across the state. Because I know that if I'm in my car out on the highway, wherever it is in the state, and I call for help, whether it's a tow truck, whether it's fire, whether it's medic, or I need the cavalry because things are going bad, that the communications that you guys enable are going to allow the cavalry to arrive so that I can go home safe at night. So thank you guys for what you do. Public safety communications is truly a team effort, and you guys contribute to safety and service every single day. Thanks for having me. And then before I turn the mic back over, I forgot to do it. I wanted to introduce two people to you guys. So in the back, you have Steve Mills, who is in the uniform. He's my assistant chief. He helps me oversee my communication support section, as well as telecom. And then to his left is Tyler Eccles. He's my new captain in my telecom section. So he oversees all my telecom stuff. Tyler used to work for me as my administrative assistant, went to the better side, went out to the greener pastures of the field, but he's come back and I have him again. Great guy, sharp guy. If you have anything you want to talk about communications with CHP, Tyler is your guy. Does a great job. It's good to have him back, and I just wanted to recognize the other part of my team that we didn't meet earlier. And again, thank you guys. You were great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And as the last official duties as president, I'm responsible for facilitating the installation of the new officers. And in keeping with the theme of a unique year with live streaming, we have a unique situation. There's a tie. Unfortunately, bylaws are a little bit silent on that, so what we're going to do is we're going to re-vote those two ties. We have a tie between Brenda and Brenda. So what we're going to do is pass out pieces of paper and ask that each of you write on the back of the piece of paper either Brenda or Brent. And then we'll recount the votes. And again, it's voting members only, so not everybody, no commercials. So go ahead and pass them out. If you would fill them out quickly, please. Get them back over to the registration table. We'll do a recount. And then if perchance we have a tie again, what we're going to do is we're going to do a random
rock, paper, scissors.
I'll do this and I'll come back around with the question.
And in the meantime, lunch is ready. So for those of you who are voting, go ahead and fill out the ballot, please, and then you can go ahead and line. Everybody else who's not voting, lunch is served. We'll start at the back of the room and work towards the front. Yeah, when you're done voting, take it back to the registration table and
Here we go
drop it
again.
in the ballot.
Oh, thanks. I have two others.
Oh, sure.
Apparently you didn't see the check.
Oh, maybe vote early, vote often.
Maybe vote early, vote often, that's right. Good, I thought maybe you
It's not.
Was this all set? Are you good?
Is it finished, right?
Yes, finish.
So,